I thought you might not recognize him in the suit, but this is Adrian.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning. You know, I've been thinking about this message, and I've worked out about 3 different ones, and I'm probably going to work on a 4th one while I'm up here speaking. You know, today is the Sabbath. Jesus rested on the Sabbath, and then he arose on Sunday morning. And why would he come down here? Was it because he didn't know what we were going through? Was it because he wanted to give us a hand getting out of the ditch? Why did he come down? Let's bow our heads, please. Dear Lord, thank you for your loving care. Thank you for being with me and my family. And Lord, bless us all here on this earth, because we're all we have except for you and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. About 22 months ago, I had a stroke. But before that, about 8 years before that, my buddy Carl had a stroke. And when he finally got home, he was able to go to lunch with us and stuff, but he couldn't eat. I had to feed him through a G-tube. Does everybody know what a G-tube is? It's one of those little tubes that's in your belly, basically, and they give you a little thing with a plunger, and you put it in there, and you push it through so he can get nourishment. And I fed him that way for quite a while, because I would pick him up, and we'd go to lunch, and I would watch him eating. I would watch us eating, and I would be watching his face, and he would be going, just seeing what we were eating, but he wasn't able to eat. And then I'd give him his food through his G-tube, and I felt really bad about it. And the other thing is, every now and then he would just have a fit and start throwing stuff around and screaming, and I didn't understand that. And then I had my stroke. After I'd been home for a little while, Vernita asked if she could go to Hawaii with Carrie and Tammy, and I said sure. But while she was gone, I had those same feelings as Carl. I would kick, I would scream, I would be driving down the road and just fall apart. I'd have to get off the road so I didn't run into anybody and hurt anyone. But I would just completely fall apart. I couldn't understand why this had happened to me. I was finally driving again when this happened. It was, about 2 months after that she went away. And now I could understand Carl completely. I could walk now. He can't walk still. But I can push him around the chair again. We go do things together. We go shooting on most Sundays. But I can understand him a whole lot better than I could before I had the stroke. Jesus could understand us completely before he ever came to earth. He knew us. But when he came down, he actually got his feet in the mud with us. And he's not just our friend, he's our brother. Everybody that's ever walked on the face of the earth is related in one way or another. He's our brother. He walked here. He got his feet dirty. He cried. He bled. He even said, if it's possible, Lord, let this cup be taken away from me. But while he was on earth, while he was on this planet, he did nothing but good. If he was here, he could make my hip feel better. My left side is still kind of weak, and I've been draining water out of the garage for 5 days now. But not today. There was no water there this morning. I wasn't going to look, but I looked. What is a friend? Can you tell me what a friend is? Just anybody, go ahead. Someone who what?
Someone who's there for you no matter what.
No matter what. That's pretty good. Anything else?
Someone who will tell you the truth about yourself.
Someone who will tell you the truth about yourself. I like it. Most of us don't want to hear it, but I still like it. Anyone else? Don't be shy. There's just a few of us here today. Melissa, I see you smiling. What are you laughing at? Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to start out with a question. I want you to hold your hands up. Have any of you ever had a friend? Hold your hand up if you had a friend. And a friend is a gift that you give yourself. In order to have a friend, you have to be a friend. I've used this example before. One time, my brother-in-law, Victor, called me, and he said, Fred rolled his car, and it's about 100 feet off the road. Do you know anybody with a big truck that could, four-wheel drive, that could come and pull him out? And so I called my buddy Dave, and we went out there, and we had enough straps, and we had this Subaru upside down on its top, which is great. And they wanted to flip it over and drag it out with the tires down. And I said, no, let's not do that. Let's pull it on its top because it's a sled now. And so we hooked up the chains and the cables and just drug it off. And it was like a knife through hot butter. It just went so easy. We got it near the road. We got it on the very edge of the road and then rolled it over. And it started up. It was a Subaru. Started up, and he drove it home. The body was pretty much shot, but the engine, transmission, everything else was good, and he had some others. This was Fred's Subaru, not Victor's. And so that was really great. We got it out there, we got it done, and then we went home, and we were home by 4 o'clock in the morning. A friend is also someone you could call at, I like 2 o'clock in the morning because it's a very inconvenient time to wake somebody up. My friend Raymond would call me, and he said, hey, Adrian, could you bring me some gas? I'd look at my watch. Where are you at, Raymond? And he says, I'm over here on the other side of town. And he said, please hurry because Charlotte's getting cold. Charlotte was his girlfriend. So anytime I went driving anywhere with Raymond, I always had him check his gas. But Raymond was a very interesting fella. He'd come across here from Germany in an old airplane, one of those two-engine prop jobs, right after World War II. It was about 5 years after. And in fact, he had a very acute German accent. And when he was in school here in the early 50s, and even a little bit before that, his teachers would refer to him as Little Hitler. And as he was coming across on the plane, one of the engines caught on fire. And so he's pointing out there and saying, "Fuer." And I guess that's, anybody know German? Okay, so I'm not totally abolishing or destroying the word as far as we know. But and people started looking to where he was pointing, and they could see the engine was on fire, and the pilot turned Jim, you know more about this than I do. What would he do to the blades? Feather them or? Feather the props. Wow, I kind of remembered something. And so, but he had troubles all the way through. He was in the army for a few years. And he would get picked on there too. And in fact, he had a lot of issues with other people because he spoke different. He acted a little bit different because he hadn't really had any good friends in his life. But you know, he told me. Well, he didn't tell me. I could see that his hair was changing color and he was losing weight. And then he retired from Vendalaska. and I knew something was wrong, so I talked to my other friend, John, who was also my boss, and he told me that he'd retired because he couldn't work anymore. He had some physical issues, and I figured out that it was cancer. And I would pick him up every day, and we'd still go to lunch. And then there came a time when he couldn't get out of bed anymore. You'd walk in his room, and it was like 95 degrees. And he'd be laying in his bed with just a sheet on him. And he couldn't get up anymore to go to lunch. I called his dad and said, Raymond's in really bad shape. You need to get an ambulance over here for him. And so he came and checked in on him, and it was like I described it. And so he called an ambulance. And they took him to the hospital. And I would see him at the hospital about noon, and I would see him in the evenings. And after about 3 days in the hospital, I talked to one of the nurses. I said, he doesn't look very good. She says, we don't expect him to make it through the night. But before this, I had talked to Raymond. He said to me, you know, you're the best friend I've ever had. And it really, really bothered me. Not that I was the best friend he'd ever had. Well, because part of it was because I was the best friend he'd ever had, and I really wasn't that great of a friend. You know, I would see him, we'd talk, we'd visit, and hang out, but you know, I can't say he was my best friend. But I went to see him at the hospital. Okay, but I'm getting a little bit out of sequence here. The day before he went to the hospital, he told me I was the best friend he ever had. And I didn't say anything, but the next day when I picked him up to take him to, my stroke is showing. I told him about the best friend I ever had. And he says, I believe in Jesus. And I said, have you ever given yourself to him? And he said, I don't know how. And that was the saddest thing I have ever heard. And so we prayed, and I got him to pray. And then he ended up in the hospital, and that's when the nurses said that they didn't expect him to make it let me slow down here. They didn't expect him to make it through the night. So I went there. I held his hand. I talked to him, and the nurse was coming by and filling his morphine bag, and she'd come and check on us, and I looked at her and I said, about 10 o'clock, I said, he looks very uncomfortable. And she looked at him and she said, okay. She went and got another nurse, and they came and readjusted him because he was sitting up a little bit in his bed. And he woke up, and he had this big smile on his face. Raymond never, ever, ever smiled big like that. The most he'd get is a little, and that was it. But he had this great big smile on his face, and he opened his eyes, and he looks at me. I'm like, what in the world are you doing here? And I don't know. I would like to think that he was looking at the face of Jesus. And then he just kind of snuggled back into his bed, and then he closed his eyes and he went to sleep. And I was there holding his hand and talking to him and praying and singing with him. And about 11:15, I'd been watching his neck and watching his chest move up and down. And I looked, and there was no movement. And I prayed. And I waited a little bit longer, and there was still no movement. And I went and got the nurses. And the first one came in, and she looked up at the clock, and then I knew he was gone already before she ever came in. And then she went and called the second one, and they wrote down the time and everything. And I asked if I could just sit there a while with him, and they let me. But, you know, it's really hard to watch a loved one, a good friend, even a pet, a faithful pet, go to sleep and not wake up. In Proverbs 17:17, it says, a friend loves at all times. And then in Proverbs 18:24, it says, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Many, many years ago, a friend and I were taking a motorcycle trip from Royal City, Washington to Brea, California. We were going there to Suzuki School. And on the trip, we got on the grapevine. Anybody know what the grapevine is? What is it, Jim?
It's the grade coming out of L.A.
Okay. But we were going through this little place called Gorman Pass there. And the weather had been fine. And we get to Gorman Pass, and there's like this much snow, and the trucks are coming by at the speed limit. Cars are going a little bit slower because the big heavy trucks that are loaded have better traction. And I'm sitting there on my motorcycle, dog paddling with my feet and holding the bike upright because it's slick and wet and icy, and they don't do very well in snow. And I'm going along, and something hits me on the back of the head. And I looked real quick to see what it was. An orange had fallen off of a truck and hit me on the back of the helmet, and it was rolling down the road in front of me. And I thought, that's really interesting. It's a good thing I was wearing a helmet. We pulled into a restaurant there, and it was a restaurant, a bar, kind of a casino thing. And we're sitting there, and there's these two other guys there. They were both riding Kawasaki's. I remember that really well. And so we're sitting there. We knew we were on their bikes because they had leather jackets on, but they had thin leather dress jackets. And Jim and I were prepared. We had, heavy jackets and gloves and helmets and stuff. These guys just had sunglasses and thin little jackets. And we got to talking to them. And they were going to Alaska. They were going to ride their motorcycles from California to Alaska. And I said, really, where are you going to go in Alaska? And they were talking about trying to come to Fairbanks. And so I said, you guys need to get a little bit warmer jackets. You need to get helmets because you're probably going to fall in the mud. It's not going to be very pleasant. And they were freezing to death the way it was there, and it wasn't that cold. And so we talked for a while, and we were there till 4 o'clock in the morning when the bar was shutting down. This guy comes up, big, rough, tough biker. And he'd been drinking. And he comes out, and he looks at us, and he sees us with our motorcycle gear and stuff. And he says, you guys need a place to stay? Yeah, they were shutting everything down. And so he says, follow me. Okay, so his Harley weighed a lot more than our bikes. And the tire on the back tire was flat, which gave him better traction. It didn't want to slide around quite so much. So we followed this guy. Stop signs didn't seem to matter to him. He would just blast through them. Of course, nobody else was on the road, just us idiots on our motorcycles. So we followed him. And when we couldn't see him, because he was going a lot faster than us, we could see the tracks in the road, so we followed him. And we finally got to his house, and it wasn't a house. It was an old chicken coop that somebody had taken cardboard and nailed it on the inside, and there's a little wood stove there. That's what he used for heat. Now, he didn't have to worry about heat because he had enough alcohol in his system that he wasn't going to freeze to death. However, none of us had been drinking because we were normal motorcyclists who were kind of trying to be aware of everything. And we stayed there in his house that night, feeding the fire all night long, talking about, different things, riding experiences all. But was that a blessing to us? Yes, it was a blessing to us. we would have been sitting out there in the parking lot freezing to death, Not because it was so cold, but just because of how wet it was. Unfortunately, he didn't wake up to say, so we could say goodbye and thank you, because he was still inebriated. But he was a blessing to us. We got on our bikes, and the snow had melted most of it, and we were able to continue on our journey. So that was a blessing to us. And I don't know whatever happened to him. I hope he's still alive, but you don't know. But Jesus didn't come to save one person or four. He came to save all of us. Everybody who is willing. You just have to follow him. We had to follow that guy on his Harley down that snowy, icy road. Jesus' road is not snowy or icy right now. It's, around here it's kind of muddy. But Jesus said, if you love me, follow me. Jim sent me a text that he was going to Michigan because his mom is in hospice. And when you lose a parent, it's pretty hard. Because they've always been there, and you don't get used to the fact that they're not there anymore. I mean, it doesn't bother you as much as it did when it first happened. My mom's been dead about 10 years, my dad about 6, but I still feel the urge to call them and talk to them. That never goes away. The same urge for Jesus should never go away. We should be wanting to talk to him, to tell him our troubles. Have you ever had a friend that you could really talk to? Tell them your hopes, your dreams, your successes, your failures. The times when things were going great, the times that were so miserable you couldn't even stand yourself. The times when you'd lost a loved one. A friend who was there to comfort and cry with you. If you were really lucky, you had such a friend. Jesus even cares about the little things. My nephew and I were up on the Borealis building pushing snow off of it because it was getting heavy. And I looked at the progress we'd made in an hour, and it wasn't, we were going to be there for days if we didn't go faster. And the snow was really heavy, and we were working hard. And I see this guy walking across a parking lot with a garbage bag. And he opens up the dumpster to throw it in there, throws it in there. And I was going to holler at him, you can't dump your trash in my dumpster. And then he hollers up there, you guys need any help? And man, did I feel bad. Here I had just asked God for help. And guess what? Here it was. And so he came up, and he was a good worker. And about, if Bobby was here, I'd say, Bobby, do you ever get hungry? Because we both like to eat. So we went, I took him to the restaurant, bought something to eat, and he didn't want to go eat. He said, I don't have any money. I said, it's okay, I'll buy lunch. And so we went there and we ate. He was a really good worker, and we got it done fast, and I got to talk to him a little bit. And I paid him, and he wanted to pay for his lunch. And I said, no. I said, you were working with me, and that's what I do. And then he said, he gave me $10 for offering for church. And I said, do you need a ride home? And he says, yes. Could we stop by a store first, though? And I said, sure. And you know what he bought? He bought a 6-pack of Mountain Dew. Not for him, but his friend who is handicapped in a wheelchair and can't get around. You know, I could talk about all the wonderful things that Jesus has done for me. I have 3 lovely daughters. I have 3 wonderful grandchildren. I have a wife who still loves me, even though I've had a stroke. The blessings I've had haven't come from anything that I have done, except that I've made the decision to follow Christ as well as I can. And, you know, he came to earth. He was born as a baby. He grew up in his society. He spoke the words that his father gave him to speak, of the words that he knew. He loved people. And if we're supposed to follow his example, we have to love people. We have to be willing to talk to him. There was a pastor. His name was also Jim. He was up here, started with an L, I think. He had 3 daughters, and his wife, I think she played the piano too. Felice or Jim, do you guys remember who this was?
I'll come up with it.
Okay. But anyway, I remember a story he told one time. This was before he became a pastor. And he said, you know, I was at the post office the other day. And he said, and there was this man over there. And he had a scowl on his face. And he says, normally I like to talk to people just a little bit, you know. And he said, this guy had a really ugly scowl on his face. And he opened up his mail and he pulled it out and he's looking through this stuff. And then he saw a letter. And all of a sudden, his face just lit up. He said, I really wish I would have gone over there and talked to him. Because he said, the change was just so instantaneous when he got that letter. And you know, we can send letters to Jesus. We don't have to put a stamp on it. We don't have to do anything. We can just pray. You know, does Jesus have bad days too? I can't imagine that hanging up on that cross was a very good day for him. I can't believe that carrying that cross up that road was a very good day for him. The flogging that he took, that wasn't a good day for him. But you know, he came, his mission wasn't for himself. You know, when you're in the army, the mission comes first, the people come second. And Jesus' mission, his mission was first. He hung up on that cross, and there was a guy next to him, the thief on the cross. And the other guy that was on the cross there started making fun of Jesus. If you're God, get yourself down and get us out of here too. And the thief on the cross said, you know, we deserve to be here. He's done nothing, and yet he's here. And then he died. And they put him basically in a cave and blocked the door off and had Roman soldiers guard it so that nobody could say that he had risen when they had just stolen his body. And he arose and he appeared to a woman. Who was her name? What was her name? Mary. What was her? What do we call her? Mary Magdalene. Why would he appear to a woman first? She was the only one who went to look. And what did she do? She ran back and told the apostles, he's not there. And how many apostles ran back to look? Two? Who were they?
Peter and John.
Peter and John. Who won the race?
John,
Why?
he was younger.
He was younger. And what did they find?
Empty tomb.
An empty tomb. And how were the grave cloths? Were they just thrown on the floor?
Folded.
They were folded up. And you know why that tomb was empty? It was empty because Jesus had risen like he said he would. And that means we can believe him when he said he's coming back too. And lots of other things happened. People that had been dead came up out of their graves alive. And the tabernacle, what happened there? The curtain was torn from the top to the bottom. Why? And also to show that it wasn't done by human hands. So, you know, a lot of people are doubters. And that's okay, that's their choice. But if we can't get them to see Jesus first, we get them to see our helping hands first. We are the hands of Jesus right now. Let's show people the love that they deserve, not because they really deserve it, but because Jesus showed us that they deserve it. Smile on your brother. There was a song, smile on your brother, everybody. Try to love one another right now. You know why right now? Because now is all we really have. We don't have the past anymore. We can't change it. We have the future, but we may not get there. Smile on your brother right now. Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, the only way we can even attempt to thank you for the blessings that you've given us, for the life that you've promised us afterwards, is to try and do everything that you've told us. And Lord, you know that we're willing, but we're weak. And Lord, we tire easily, especially as we get older. But Lord, help us to remember that a new day is coming, where we will see you face to face. And Lord, you will put your arms on our shoulders and look into our eyes and say, well done, my good and faithful servant.